It was 1969, mid-August, and I had realized my third life goal. I was a world traveler. You know, when you're a young person, you stop and you think about all what life is going to bring to you. And what are your questions? You know, where am I going? What am I going to do? And my answer was, I want to meet people. I want to find out what the world is like, and I want to travel. But first, I had to get my degree from UBC, which I did. I had to teach, which I did, and then saved up enough money so that I could go on this world trip. I wanted to visit countries that I'd read about in books, that I understood. I wanted to see cities and historic monuments that I had read about. I wanted, honestly, to meet people and see what their customs were like and understand who they were and what they were about. I honestly wanted to try and figure out, you know, what the answer is to relationships and how I should live my life. Well, at this moment, and I'm 26 years old, I've been living in a suitcase for 6 weeks. I really and truly wanted to try and think of all the wonderful adventures I had. This was the last leg of my journey. I had seen all those things. I'd had adventures, I'd had wonderful experiences, and I'd met many memorable people whom I adored, and some that I would rather have not met. I was at the train station in Budapest, and I was there with Attica, who was my new best friend, and my interpreter, and his family. Attica's family had taken me as a young woman, and they had fed me. They gave me a place to sleep. They also showed me around Budapest when the friend I was supposed to meet wasn't able to come to the station. So I stayed with them, and I used up my 3 days visa, but now it was time to leave, and saying goodbyes was always difficult. But I had to say goodbye, and so I did. I hugged Attica. I hugged his parents, each in turn, and I felt so very fortunate that they had looked after me. Finally, it was time to board the train, so I waved a final goodbye, and I got on the train. So I walked down the aisle looking for a place to sit, and there I saw this little lady sitting by herself. She had these dark, sparkling eyes and this long, silky hair, and she looked a bit like a gypsy, a little mysterious. So I said to her, "May I sit down beside you?" And she shrugged her shoulders and said, yes, which was a motion. I presumed then she didn't speak English. So I put my suitcase away and I sat down beside her and I smiled at her, and then I began to relax because the train was going to start soon. Finally, the train started and I closed my eyes and I was sort of dozing off, and all of a sudden I felt this jab in my shoulder and I thought, what's going on? So I turned around suddenly and she's stuffing something in her blouse. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what is it? So I looked, and then I thought, that's none of my business. So I turned around and looked back, and then I thought, that looked like money. She's probably taking some money or smuggling it out of Hungary. And you do know that at that point it was a communist country, and to take money out of Hungary was definitely illegal and extremely difficult. But you had to sort of figure out how you could get money out if you were going to leave in a short time so you could exist elsewhere. A little different than Canada, of course. I relaxed again, and she stopped wiggling, and so I dozed off and went back to sleep. And then when I woke up, the train had stopped, and I was ready to get off. So I picked up my luggage out of the shelf, and I walked off the train and walked into the station. And there were always big train stations and many tracks, so I looked around trying to find my track, and I didn't want to make a mistake, so I had to kind of read the schedule and make sure that I had, of course, gotten the same track. So I found my track and I found my train. And then I stood up again because I was sitting on my luggage, and I moved forward and I was going to turn around, and then suddenly I heard this voice, and it said, "Are you alone?" Now, I froze. I didn't quite know what to do because, yes, I was alone. And I thought, well, perhaps I'd better just sort of see what this is going on. Maybe he's not talking to me. So I turned around, and sure enough, there was this huge man, a little creepy, standing in front of me. No uniform, no badge, no nothing to identify who he was. And he was holding on to my suitcase. Now, I didn't quite know what to say, but I looked at him and I put my hand out for my suitcase, and he put his hand back with my suitcase, and I said, what is it you want? And he just said, "Are you alone?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not alone." So I told him I'm meeting somebody on the train. I'm going on there, and he said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, then follow me." And so I started walking and watched him, and he followed me slowly. And we went and got on the train, and I walked down there and down the row again, and I thought, what am I going to do now? And there she was, this elderly lady with the sparkly dark eyes and this long silky black hair. And I looked at her, and I didn't know what else to say, but I said, "Mother." And she looked at me, and she recognized me from the other train, and she said, she didn't say anything other than she put her arms out too. So I thought, okay, I'll go and sit down there, which I did, turned around to the man, and he said, "That's not your mother." And I said, "Yes, that's my mother, and I'm sitting here, and I want my suitcase back." And he looked at me for a minute. It must have been 30 seconds because it seemed like a long time. He finally put my suitcase down, turned around, and muttered, "That's not her mother. She's a blonde." And I kept thinking, oh my God, this is good. He's left. And he didn't even ask for a tip, and I was willing to pay him, but at this point, we'll leave that alone. So I sat down with this little lady. We looked at each other, we smiled, we shared our lunch. We couldn't talk because there was a language barrier. But we did realize that we sort of supported each other, made each other feel safe. And what I felt is that in my trip to Europe, I sort of felt three things. Number one, I was in a country where nobody spoke English. So I knew what it was like when you come to a country and you speak a different language, and how difficult it is to get along. The second thing I learned was that everybody will help if you give them a chance, regardless of race, regardless of religion, or regardless of family. They will help you if you need help in most instances. So I really and truly learned that around the world, underneath, people are all the same. Countries may be different, religions may be different, and races may be different. But as Maya Angelou said, we are more alike than we are unalike.